Thanatos, Everything Dies, by Zero. Read by Samantha Gove, with permission of the author. Thank you to my friends in Paragon. A special thank you to Kyler, and I need to visit more. I ask myself these questions often and throughout my days. At what point should I have stopped this? When should I have stopped myself? When should I have stopped him? At what point did we stop being good, and when, through a series of decisions, did we become the very thing which we would have at one time tried to stop? This is not a story of men becoming heroes. This is not even a story of heroes. This is the story of the birth of a major threat, born from good intentions. Now, everything dies. Chapter 1. Tattered Outskirts. Gentlemen, over the past decade, we've been at war with anyone and everyone. They came at us with bows, axes, and magic. We're still here. They're not. Commander Darius Orn began talks with his men, as most do, by creating a bond of camaraderie, even though it's doubtful the bulk of them would be breaking bread in peacetime. He wasn't an inch taller than the average man in his unit. He kept his hair cut very short like many in his station, but he managed to stay clean-shaven where many had failed. His tan skin, reddened by life outdoors, and his very light gray hair combined to make him appear older than he actually was. His yellow eyes scanned for weakness. His men were not weak. They sat quietly, some eating, some inspecting their armor, some writing messages to whatever place they might call home, yet all were listening. Good. We enter Blackmaw. It's an empty wasteland full of poisoned dirt and water. Nothing lives here, nothing is going to live here, and we're about to die over it. Our orders are simple. We take it. That got their attention. Everyone stopped their respective tasks and faces met the light. Yes, that's right. They knew. They all knew they were going to die. Some 2,000 had made it this far, further than anyone else. And every single one of them would die if what he was saying was true. The women were few, but they were there. Only one of them was brave enough to say what the other men thought. Blackmaw is full of the dark dust. The iron sand kills. No medicine or magic cures it. If we get too close, even the very air we breathe will kill us. That was Augustana, whose eyes seemed to glow in the shine of the sunset. A good soldier and a shining example of heroism. She relied more on her gods than strategy, but even her resolve was shaken at the news. Darius didn't correct her. It kills slowly, but it kills. You might last weeks, months, or even years, but you'll die of it. Organs will fail you one by one. You'll spit up red and you'll die. As far as deaths go, I prefer a quick beheading. We aim to reach the opening deep into Blackmaw. Inside we'll reach a treasure that General Gaust has spent 3 fortunes trying to get to. Throughout history, generals of the past had often donated to causes they believed in or wars they took part in. Doing so would merit him rewards upon victory. Generally land or a split of the tribute or such. In this case, General Gaust would have full access to whatever lied within Blackmaw. One of the men, still drenched in sweat, spoke with his brown hair dangling in front of his face. His arms tired, but still strong enough to use a sword to hold his weight. What's the treasure? Does dying for him merit an explanation of what we're dying for? Darius looked at the shirtless man. A friend of his, one that he didn't take for being an insubordinate whelp. Although of those that got this far, none of them were whelps. Not at this camp. They were weeded out by war and harsh terrain. Meredith, you look like bloody hell. From what I hear, he's coming to tell us himself. I'd hold your questions for him. Meredith nodded. It's not often we get to die for something, but I'd rather know what I'm dying for. Everything dies. Nothing to be scared of, but I need a good reason to hand it over. So true. In war, you are often asked to risk your life. But in this case, death was cold and final. It would come, and it would be unavoidable, even if they left seemingly uninjured. Darius had managed to go through 3 wars uninjured and healthy. Whenever asked how he did it, "Lucky," he'd say. But few believed it had only to do with luck. Darius was one of the very best at finishing a mission with few or no casualties. He had a fierce reputation, and a smart general would leave field decisions to an immortal like Darius. His nickname was the Immortal, after all, based purely on the fact nothing had managed to hurt him in all his years. Not a scratch. At worst, he got rough hands and sunburned. But this would be different. Even he would die if he took one step into Blackmaw, let alone trekked into the deep chasm, an opening through jagged stalactites poking out like a gaping mouth. Black sand for as far as the eye could see, while an indifferent sun watched over it until the uncaring moon took its shift. No one could be sure what was inside the deep chasm, but they knew it was a prize worth war. Strange that they didn't just break out into a riot right here. But then, they were soldiers, and they made it this far by relying on Darius the Immortal. Maybe for once, they would see Darius sweat. No, he intended to disappoint them. He supposed now was as good a time as any to die, and he didn't seem to care about the cause. He had no family, nor did he need one. Somehow that made it easier to take risks. But his unit always gave him something akin to a family to look after. Still, it was a cruel thing to ask. Here comes the guest of honor now. General Gaust approached, uniformed and clean. He removed his hat to reveal his tired face. He looked drained, not just by the war, but the dread of asking what he was going to ask. He left as much as he could to Darius, but he needed to explain the situation. "Darius has informed you of the danger?" A few nods and one spit. He understood. Deep inside Blackmaw is the key to ending war. Not just this war, but all of them. What we will find inside Blackmaw is an instrument left by the gods. Using guesses from both our greatest magus and the collective agreement of scholars, it may be a power source that observes the world or beyond it. I do not know what power this instrument has, but I know if we claim it, the war will end. Just like that. No one else will have to die over this war. The war has lasted since the discovery of this artifact. Yet only now can we get close enough to take it. We travel by foot. The terrain is too harsh for beastkin, and carts would only slow us down. Meredith asked a fair question. Could we use flight? We must have a few who could use magic. The general shook his head, his voice boosted by magics that would fail as they got closer. No, the dark dust will tamper with most, if not all magic, making it impossible to cast a spell. Elves wouldn't even be able to last an hour. The best equipment we can offer you is a mask that'll keep you from breathing in the particles. But it's absorbed through the skin, and even the best protection fails us. The dark dust gets through pretty much anything that could be worn. But if we make it, and we can make it, we end the war just like that. Augustana looked around, her blonde hair making her easy to spot, even at a distance. General, you can't ask this of us and take no risk. The general agreed. I've risked all my family's assets, and I've decided to risk my life. I'm going with you. It's the least I can do. But I can't go alone. Darius nodded. I've agreed to go with him. Some would have to wait, stay with the carts, and bring the injured back. But no one could be sure who would get that job. Darius took a moment more to explain the situation, the plan, and what pitiful protection they could spare. It wasn't just the iron sand. It was the journey, and they would certainly face enemies seeking to stop them from claiming the prize. Their enemies weren't ready to go after it themselves, but they weren't going to just let them reach the prize. They were more than willing to hurl rocks or ballista bolts at them. They'd probably even send unprotected, expendable lives just to try to slow them down. Of course, without basic protective gear, they wouldn't make it to the Maw, but they could give Darius and his group hell. There would be people dying just to try to slow them down. Everyone who entered that field would certainly die, even Darius the Immortal. Those of you who will go with me, step forward. He had 2,000 strong. Chapter 2. Leonardo and Jean Gaust. Jean Gaust's first childbirth nearly cost her life. A petite woman with natural beauty, she carried her first child with some measure of clumsiness. The shift of weight and form often caused her to bump into things around the house. She constantly worried about herself and her firstborn, as only a new mother could fathom. Perhaps it would have been easier if her husband weren't away so often. More often than not, he was gone for years at a time. Typically, once every 2 years, he might have a few weeks to spend with his family instead of commanding a battle. It was painful for her to have him gone, since the first birth was more painful and more dangerous. Had she not been part of a noble house, she might have died from the unclean hospitals during this wartime. She was able to have her first child at home, her mother and grandmother still alive to aid the process. They had wits enough to prepare a room and supplies enough to ensure the newborn made it. Isla, she named her. When Isla was born, she cried loudly until one of the staff soothed the child's back. A few pats and the baby's cries softened. It was then Isla was handed to her mother. It was a tender moment, natural and beautiful. Jean's second child did not pain her. Indeed, it happened quickly. So quickly, in fact, they worried for the child. It was more than a month earlier than expected, and the birthing process was quick and alarmingly painless. Jean worried for the child as it did not cry. Upon confirming the babe's breathing and coughing up a little fluid, they gave the child to her mother. The mother looked at the child with a worried look, and at last a name came with a smile. Alice. The girl was petite, even for a newborn. But considering her mother's size and an early birth, it wasn't something unexpected. Alice slept, ate, and grew fine, never crying, never once. This made the child difficult to care for despite the respite from the usual wails of a child. Isla was 2 years and some months older, old enough to try to get little Alice to try to smile. Little games like peekaboo and attempts to play with her always got strange looks instead of laughter. When her father finally laid eyes upon her, it seemed that he didn't share the same worry. Let us gather the family. It's a little late, but a celebration is in order. We need one in these times. He wasn't wrong. Alice was born in a time of war, like her sister, although it meant relatively little to the children. They were well cared for. Isla took immediately to adding colors to whatever she could. Rocks in the garden or even watering cans meant for garden plants were something she liked to paint. She tried to make everything colorful. Alice seemed more interested in worms and insects than in any art project. As the girls grew, Alice seemed most entertained when shown pictures of plants, insects, and animals. Isla couldn't stand the insects that Alice seemed to adore. Jean often found it strange as well. The little one could talk early, asking questions and almost in a hurry to read. Isla had learned to read at a young age, but Alice was a prodigy of sorts. Despite the fact she always seemed to throw off whatever clothes and hats were put on her, she showed remarkable potential. She started speaking some words at 6 months, astounding the household servants, who often encouraged her to speak more. At the age of 2, she started bringing books to whomever she could and pointing at a certain word, asking what the word was. Although she got disappointed looks for frequently throwing or tearing up her clothes, she made up for it with her growing ability to speak simple words and eventually make out small parts of the written language. Alice started displaying advanced signs of reading at 2. Isla's instructor saw the need to tutor both of them. The servants were used to children, but Alice often drove them out of their wits. She could speak, but she could not be reasoned with. It almost made them forget how young she was. They sometimes had to tie her clothes on to make her wear a simple dress. She seemed to have no issue with dropping something on her clothes just to make them take it off. Luckily, she was young enough that others understood some children could be difficult to deal with. Isla never had that problem. She liked clothes, and she liked picking them out. She liked giving other people clothes, even if they couldn't think of a time and place to wear them. Alice couldn't stand the idea of exchanging garbs. Isla couldn't stand Alice's insects. They were very different from the start. When Alice started to read, she soon surpassed her sister, although Isla didn't seem embarrassed by it. The tutor soon became fixated on Alice. He might have been of a different race, an elf, but he had taught many human children in his years. It was soon accepted Alice was a true miracle. She learned to speak, read, and reason far beyond what would be expected of a child. The tutor impressed upon her father, whenever he found the time to be home, to invest in his daughter's education early. Prioritizing education for his daughters was his intention before being told such, but the urgency now became clear. It seemed every time he met her, he could not help but gush at how quickly she learned. She requested more books from her father, and the tutor even went so far as to ask if there was a field of study he preferred her to be in. Due to a combination of the girl's interests and her family background, the Gauss patriarch came to impress medical study upon her. She studied chemicals, herbs, and even magic were applicable. Things which a normal child would have no interest in seemed to fascinate little Alice. By the time she was 4, she was able to read by herself. It was difficult to find a balance of books with words a child might easily read and learn medicine. Their worries were groundless. It did not take her long to read textbooks meant for young adults. What's more, she was able to process and understand. Her eyes seemed to have a special brightness to them when she read. By the time she was 5, her behavior took a turn for the worse. She got in trouble multiple times for kicking servants or household pets who interrupted her reading. Isla kept trying to be her friend and failing. She even went as far as trying to read what Alice read. She put down the dolls and really tried catching up with her sister. Her own progress was nothing to be ashamed of. Any parent would have seen her as a prodigy in her own right, but there was no way to keep up with Alice. Isla could read, but she couldn't comprehend. She didn't understand the concepts Alice did. "Alice, can you help me with this book?" Alice would coldly say, "No." Isla frowned and had long since came to expect this. "Why are you so mean?" Alice kept reading, irritated that Isla interrupted her. "You're stupid. You'd slow me down if I taught you." Isla started to cry. Her wailing caused Alice to lose what patience she had. She threw one of her pet spiders at Isla. Isla ran off crying. Alice's mother punished her by making her stay in her room. "Good. Make sure I have books. Books and someone to teach me math," Alice said. Years passed and her behavior didn't improve. It was difficult to bring Alice to any get-together or occasion. Alice made it perfectly clear she was displeased to be in public places. Typical rewards like treats didn't seem to entice her. Her mother was at her wit's end. She needed her husband's strong hand at times. Being in the military, he had some ways to make Alice mind. He seemed to have no trouble commanding respect for men and children. Was she not intimidating enough? Either way, Alice was out of her control. Alice could quickly impress crowds of people, and the children hated her. She was a prodigy. Trying to have a conversation with children her age was impossible. She gave up talking to girls and boys her own age, and instead sought out anyone who might talk to her about something she cared about. Usually psychology, or someone who wouldn't baby talk to her. If you used a cute voice, it annoyed her. She didn't want to go to children's birthday parties and dreaded her own. She definitely disliked having company, nor did she like children visiting. She wanted to be in her room, alone. At one such birthday party, her father was home. He came into her room and asked what she learned, and he took an interest in what she told him. After getting an idea of what books she might need, he tried offering her a reward which a child her age might want. "If you'll be good, get dressed, and go downstairs. I'll get something you actually like for your birthday. Name it." She wanted a scorpion and a pair of long tweezers and tongs, and gloves so she could pick up her spiders. Books on spiders and scorpions. "Would you prefer a rabbit?" he asked, rather baffled. She considered it. Then Alice told him flatly, "I'm not Isla. I don't want a rabbit." Her father considered. "All right, if you're good for a week for your mother, and you're nice to your sister, I'll give you a scorpion. But why do you want it?" Alice began to point at her book for a particular scorpion. "It's easy enough to get. It's a common one that lays its eggs in wood. You might find it in a barn or something." She explained the venom could possibly be used for medicine, but few were willing to work with such medicine as a painkiller. She wanted to make a painkiller? Given the war? There was no shortage of need for something like that, and if it could be made organically through bred scorpions? The child had no idea how useful something like that could be. His little girl, who knew nothing of war, was already thinking of creating something that was massively in demand. Leonardo hugged his little one, now certain she would be a great mind someday. He was determined to get her involved in the medical field as soon as possible. In his excitement, he began looking into options for helping his daughter get a lab of sorts. Her room would not suffice. He soon found similar motivations worked on Alice. She wanted certain wasps and places to keep them, and help feeding them if possible. Her father was pleased with her even more so now that he had found a way to motivate Alice at last. The distractions of war took his focus for so long that he realized he knew little of his family. Leonardo reflected on the expense of a first-rate medical lab. It was a sobering thought. His family was getting deeper and deeper into debt thanks to his donations to the troops. He couldn't just let those under him die from being under-equipped. The payout would one day come from his donations. Due to budget constraints, a very basic laboratory was assembled for Alice. It took much shifting of old storage space in a basement to make room for tables, chemicals, and animals. At the age of 9, Alice managed to create an antivenom for scorpion stings. It was presented to investors, and while not as effective as more common remedies, it was a new remedy all the same. It was more costly and not easily fit for mass production. However, the real product being presented to potential investors and nobles was Alice, a girl, at the age of 9? Based on descriptions, a tiny blonde girl with bright green eyes? A girl who managed to cook up something in a basement wearing only her underpants. What else could she do? Her father suggested creating a company with his daughter in mind. This wasn't just the ravings of a desperate man losing money on a war with little payout. This was something useful. He told her, "If you manage to get another antivenom or an even better painkiller which surpasses or matches the ones being commonly used, I'll get you a pony." She seemed disinterested at first and promptly returned to her book after considering it. It became clear to him that her gaining a reputation did not help his position. The girl was rarely seen, and he hid her when possible. Rumors started about her being forced to do the work she did. Some people even said someone like Alice should not be under his care. Such thoughts reached his ear eventually. He realized the problem. Alice had been made a target. Men came to his home asking to see his treatment of Alice, and all of them ended up leaving, frightened by the girl. Not one questioned his parenting. At age 11, she came to him. The war was finally near its end. Gauss was deep into drink. His funds were drying up little by little, but it was the final stretch. He sat in his study looking at flames when his daughter came to him. She had actually dressed herself up in a dress. She was scratching herself and fidgeting uncomfortably. "Can I have the pony now?" His eyes narrowed with wary apprehension. Then he relaxed and put his paperwork down. "What did you make?" She presented him with a strange liquid. "It's a painkiller. I also have a better antivenom if that's not enough." He put down his glass and examined the vial of a strange liquid. "This is a painkiller?" Alice tried to sound bored as she explained with urgency in her voice. "I can make more of it, but it'd be better to teach others how to make and sell it. It's addictive, so it wouldn't be hard to sell. Can I have a pony now?" Leonardo Gauss could barely believe his ears. "Truly, you made something like this?" He was beginning to think she didn't even want a pony. It was just something he said in a crude attempt to bribe her. But if what she said was true... Alice couldn't seem to grasp what he was getting so excited over. But it did not matter. The next day he presented it to investors. The painkiller could be produced in sizable and profitable amounts. With his daughter as part owner, he began seeing an instant return on his investment and even immediate profits. Orders began coming in. This was exactly what he needed. He got her the pony she asked for without delay. The baby horse was small enough to be carried by a man. He proudly presented it to her and she smiled. Perfect. He's in good health. He left her to play with the pony. She was trying to guide the pony, but it was being stubborn and did not want to move in the direction the small girl wanted to go. Gauss went inside to visit sick daughter Isla. Standing near the stair window, something caught his eye. Alice was hurting the pony. It was laying down helpless and she was hitting it with a riding crop. The servants were quick to stop her, and he was almost ready to dart down to reprimand her when something dawned on him. Is that what she wanted the pony for? Why did she suddenly come to him then, of all times? Isla wasn't really sick, was she? He went into Isla's room and saw her flinch at the door opening. He asked if he could take a look at her. He prayed to the gods that he was wrong about what his gut was telling him. At first, there were no signs that Isla had been harmed. He had nearly given up looking until he noticed the bottoms of her feet. There were sting marks. There were wasp stings on the bottom of her feet. How long has she been doing this to you? Isla started to cry. She said she'd kill my rabbit if I told anyone. She threatened to hurt me and Mom. She stung me with her scorpions, and when I got sick, she made an antivenom so I wouldn't die. Anytime I made her mad, she stings me and my rabbit. It wasn't just Isla. She had threatened servants and even scared his wife. She had been threatened by her own child. Alice demonstrated an understanding about making appropriate threats. Social threats of what might happen to the family if certain information were revealed, children taken away, or simply pain. She was controlling everyone who had dealings with her. He ordered her locked up and immediately sought out professional help. Help that could be counted on to change his daughter's strange habits. He took away her bugs and sent Isla away to friends. The professionals were helpful, of course, offering to assist with his plight. Great profits from the work Alice had created were adding up, and he hadn't even made a proper name for the company. The placeholder he put under his family name, Gauss. The public could not know of Alice, but her mind was too great to lock away. She needed to continue her experiments. She would need to be seen at some point. For years he balanced the stress of the war and his family, but the hiding of his daughter and the running of a new medical company were too much. He became a recluse to his friends. His wife and he had an estranged relationship that grew worse with time. It was a relief to be called to the field, even more so to hear that they had almost reached the final push. Black Maw was at last within his grasp. Within it, he believed he would find a device capable of observing the deep stars, or perhaps the entire world. It mattered not to him that such creations could not be made by elves, humans, or dwarves. Only the gods could have made such a thing. The power was immense. Hope filled him. He could restore his family. He could benefit the entire world. This was his chance. He just had to make it through Black Maw.